Hi, in this video, I'll explain the difference between two situations. One situation when you have a nicely factored equation that's equal to 0 and you solve it pretty easily. And then the second situation is when you also have a nicely factored equation, but the other side is not 0, in which case you don't take the same approach at all. This is what I mean. Let's say that you have this equation, x plus 1 times x minus 2 is equal to 0. Then we take advantage of what's called the zero products property. And it says that if two things multiply to 0, one of them has to be 0. If a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. That's the only way for two numbers to multiply to 0. So in this case, what you get is either x plus 1 equals 0, in which case x equals to -1, or x minus 2 is equal to 0, in which case x equal to 2. We can check this by plugging in. And sure enough, the first factor is equal to 0 times the second, and so the whole thing is 0. And then if you do it for x equals 2, you find out that it's the other factor that is 0. So the solutions work out. When you have two factors that multiply and the other side is equal to 0, then you can use the zero product property and deal with just one factor at a time. In summary, this is what happened. Two factors equal 0, you break, it has to be either this one is equal to 0 or that one is equal to 0. But this does not work if the right-hand side is non-zero. So let's take a similar factor. When you have two factors that multiply to 2, you have no idea what's going on. There's no way you can figure out what each of them has to be. When they multiply to 0, one of them has to be 0. Because in the world of multiplication, the only way to multiply out to 0 is to have 0 times something. But in terms of multiplying to 2, who knows? It could be 1 times 2, but it could also be 0.5 times 4. It could also be all kinds of crazy factors with crazy decimals. You cannot make any guess as to what each of these factors could be. When the right-hand side is a 2 like this, we have no idea what two numbers multiply to it. It could be 1 times 2, or it could be 0.5 times 4. 0.5 times 4 is 2. It could be 3.14 times 0.63694, etc. Who knows what two numbers, and for that matter, they could be negative as well. Who knows what two numbers with crazy decimals could multiply out to be equal to 2? That's why there's no equivalent products property when the right-hand side is not 0. So how do we solve it? We have to expand it out and make the right-hand side equal to 0. By subtracting off that 2. So let's go ahead and show you how this equation is solved. X plus 1 times x minus 2 is equal to 2. Then I have to expand out the left side, and then I have to subtract 2 to make the right-hand side 0. These combine to minus x. Then subtract 2 both sides. I get to this point, and now I have a quadratic equation on the left. So I either have to factor it if I can, and if not, I have to use quadratic formula. I can't factor, so I have to use quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals -1, and C equals -4. All the negatives have parentheses around them to make sure I get the sign correct. So -1 is +1. Inside the square root here, the -1 squared is a +1. -4 times 1 times another -4. So the minus and the negative here becomes a plus. 4 times 1 times 4 is 16. If we take these two solutions and we calculate it out in terms of decimal, this one is equal to something like 2.56155, etc. And this one is equal to -1.56155, etc. There's no way starting at the beginning that we could have guessed that, one of these crazy decimals is the solution. There's no shortcut if the right-hand side is non-zero. There's no non-zero products property. It only works if it's a zero product. And that's why a key step is to expand out, make the right-hand side 0, then either factor or quadratic formula. So let's write the summary. Something times something is equal to a number g that's not 0. Then what you do, expand this part out, minus d both sides. Then what you end up is something x squared, etc., equal to 0. And so step 3 is either factor. By this time, if you factor, the right-hand side 0, so you can use the zero product property. But if factoring is not possible, then quadratic formula. Right, hope that helps. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more contents. Bye.